This next presenter is been a friend of mine for a long time. He's one of those guys that I'll call and say, I've got a crazy idea and I need someone who's really smart, who really understands the industry to give me no BS insight. And that is Jack Miller, who's the CEO of a company called T360. You would know them because they're the ones that publish, everything from the trends report every year to the, hey, here's everything you need to know what's happening with the lawsuits, to they are one of the go-to consulting firms. Every CEO around the world in real estate knows if you got a project and you need help, they have the danger report. If you need help, T360 is the go-to place. So to finish it off today, I said, Jack, would you spend just a couple of minutes and give us some insight on what agents need to know? Like, I don't want to, no fear mongering, just insight into what's happening with the lawsuits. Should they care, or should they just keep selling houses and take action like all the things we talked about today? So Jack, thanks so much for joining and kind of finishing off this workshop today. Give us some insight on this.
You bet. Yeah. And I just want to say, Christy absolutely crushed it. I've watched a lot of people training on this issue, and she's fantastic. So I'm going to tell you some things, and then part of what you should do is your homework is go rewatch her presentation, because many of the things I have to say, Tom, end up going back to kind of some core fundamentals that Christy was teaching about knowing your value, expressing it, selling your services, making sure your clients really understand the value you bring in being involved in a transaction. Because so much of this industry is confidence in the value that you bring, which you do bring value. I feel like this is an industry, from whatever reason, we got a lot of people that don't fully value their time. And I've got an exercise I'm going to recommend for people on this call to do if they're not sure how to value themselves. I can tell you exactly how to get that done. So as far as the lawsuits are concerned, and here's the strategic picture. And, I've got about 50 slides on this thing. We can spend a lot of time on it, but I will sum up kind of where we are with lawsuits right now. This morning at realestatenews.com, which is our sister media company, they just pinged me and said, hey, there's a 20th copycat lawsuit being filed right now. We have lawsuits filed in, I'll just read through the states: Missouri, Illinois, Massachusetts, South Carolina, New York, Texas, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Florida, California, Ohio, Maryland, Arizona, Nevada. If you don't have one of these in your state, you will soon. And the issue is, and you asked a very important question, do we as agents, do we just keep going and just not pay attention to the noise? Or what do we do with this? Yeah. And what I will tell you is, number one, your client is seeing information about these lawsuits in the news. So the reason to stay appraised of what's going on is because this is going into the ears and into the visual oculatory system of the consumer, and they are thinking about it. And you are going to be, if you haven't already, you probably will be sitting across the table from somebody who's going to say something to the effect of, I see your industry is being sued by all these people and it's related to compensation. What's up with that? So you need to be prepared, and I'll echo what Christy said. You need to role play both your buyer and your seller presentations in answering those kinds of objections and questions, because if you haven't had it already, they will come up. Tom, I'm on a lot of Facebook groups. I monitor a lot of stuff just like you. You and I are just hounds for this industry. And I've already seen people for months now posting like, hey, I went into this appointment. They asked me about this. Or, I'm showing homes that are now showing a $1 commission or no commission. A number of MLSs have changed their technical rules and now are allowing $0 to be put in there. And I talked to a seller that said, hey, I understand I don't have to pay for the buyer side anymore. What's up with that? So you need to be prepared to explain your value, both as a buyer, agent, and on the sell side. Tom, jump in here.
Bingo. And Jack, it's interesting. So I have a really good friend of mine who Tom Toole, who's an extraordinary agent. Yeah. And so he and I have a Google Doc, and I'm going to share it with all of you that are watching. We started publishing, call it the 3 most common objections you're going to get from buyers. Hey, I keep hearing about these lawsuits, and it's very simple. And I'm not going to give you all the answers now, but it literally is like, so Jack, tell me what you've read. Right? Because sometimes they're just saying it because they want to say it, right? And we don't want to start defending something that doesn't need to be defended, right? Yeah. So we need to just ask and find out what they're thinking. We've got the same thing on the sell side. But one of the things we just added in recently is remember, like do's and don'ts. You have to know your own state rules. But in many cases, like for him in Pennsylvania, if they don't sign a buyer brokerage agreement and they just walk in cold, they're accepting whatever the co-op agreement is.
Correct.
So if it says $1 or $0, they're accepting that. So you've got to know what your state is doing, what the rules are. And that's why the buyer agency presentation is so important.
I would suggest, so Tom, as you know, our consultancy, we're about 40 people. We do a lot of work with brokerages and big teams and associations and MLSs. We've been called into some states to look at their rules and look at their agency law and how it's being interpreted. And what I can tell you is almost everybody in the industry right now needs to go back to school on agency in their state. And it varies from state to state. You have some states that assume you're in a transaction brokerage status. You have some states that assume you're in an agency status. And it needs to be interpreted specific to your state. So if you're on this call and you're like, I'm not sure what status I'm in if I don't have a signed agreement, you need to go talk to your broker. You need to go make sure you understand exactly where you are today if you have nothing signed. And then if you do sign something, you need to make sure that you're working with agreements that have been promulgated through your broker, through the broker's attorneys, because almost everybody right now, Tom, is touching both their buyer brokerage agreements as well as their listing agreements to cover off this situation where the compensation is not clear. And so if you haven't looked at this, and I'm telling you, we've looked at probably 40 brokerages at this point. More than half of them were using custom agreements. Most of them were crummy and needed to be revisited. They had confusing terms, they had loopholes, they had things in there that would really leave you as an agent, potentially out to dry. So this is something where you got to button down. And I know nobody's excited about going and scrutinizing their agreements, but it's important right now to go do it. And if you're in leadership, you need to go do it. And that's been a lot of our work, has been working with leadership and broker owners on making sure their materials are up to date and working well.
This is one of the reasons why I wanted you on this show. I mean, here we are, we're talking about listing attraction. We're talking about rates dropping. We're talking about the buyer demand. And yet, if we didn't bring this up, I don't think we'd be doing our part, right?
Correct.
People need to understand now is the time that you need to, what's the old line? Cross all the T's, dot all the I's, and make sure that all of your agreements are right for today's market. For today's market, it is so important, my friends. I don't care if you're in Beverly Hills or if you're in, Tuscaloosa, you have got to get it right. Because I have heard some people say to me, Jack, this seems to be more of a coastal thing. I'm not hearing it as much in the middle of the country. And my response is, hey, by mid-2024, right, this might even become something that we talk about in the news of, the election cycle. Like this is a real estate. The GDP of the US, it's like 17, 18% of the entire GDP. It is a big part of the deal. So thank you. So
now, there's a few more comments.
Tell me, go.
Go. So this is coming to everywhere because you are going to see, we're at 20 since the October decision in Sitzer Burnett, there have been 16 cases filed. We're seeing them filed at a rate of about 2 a week. And so every state is going to end up going to the woodshed. There's going to be a suit. If you're with a large firm, you're almost certainly going to be named, but almost all, even we're seeing small companies getting named in these things. And it's because all these attorneys are trying to get paperwork in so that they can claim a chunk of the attorney's fees for them, right? So you're going to see that. So there's a massive incentive for these copycat lawsuits. So you're going to see it. Now is the time, exactly what you said, button everything down, make sure it's tight. This is not business as usual. You can't, and the other point I'll make is you cannot just, and I've heard this for the last 2 years, I've had leaders at large organizations tell me, oh, it's going to be years in appeal and NAR is going to fight and da-da-da-da-da. None of that matters at all. None of it matters at all because consumers are seeing it in the news. And they're going to ask questions and people are changing practices and you want to be on the front side of this, not the back side of this. So the point I'm making is take action now because otherwise you're going to be chasing it and you don't want to be chasing this thing. You want to be on the front side of it. And again, Christy's presentation, there's some other great coaches out there that I've seen phenomenal presentations. Brush up on your agency, go after that. And I want to also leave the group with some other future, just a little bit of future thinking here.
Thank you.
So we're in conversations with a number of companies. There is talk of like, what does a settlement look like, right? And there is some pressure to like, how do we settle out of these? And it's a longer conversation than we want to have fit for this group particularly, but there is some discussion about settlement. And it's generally accepted speculation that any settlement, if there was a global settlement done by NAR or by a group of brokers that got together and said, hey, we're going to settle all these as a singular class action, which is how these things resolve. Some of the terms, there's going to be financial terms to that settlement, which again, I could talk a lot about those, but we're not going to get into that today. But there's business terms of that settlement. And Tom, one of the business terms of that settlement that is almost certainly going to be in there is that the buyer broker compensation field as a standalone field that has a percentage in it or a dollar amount in it comes out of the MLS. That is like everybody that we're talking to, all the attorneys, everybody, they're saying, look, that's coming out. There may be another field that says seller concessions that may have like, oh, we'll concede X dollars, X whatever. But I'm just saying, if you are looking down the road and saying, how does this eventually end up? It likely ends up with that buyer compensation field being either removed or significantly changed to more of a seller concession type field where your compensation on the buy side is not guaranteed. So that's the whole point. Now, it's not guaranteed right now. An individual seller could put zero in there, but imagine if the field is gone. So my point is, get on the front side of this. Go watch Christy's presentation again. Go get your agency laws well understood. Talk to your broker. Talk to your peers in your market, and get everything papered and cleaned up, and make sure you're going into every client relationship where your hours are minded, your time is respected and valued.
Jack, you are so on point, and I'm listening to you intently, and I'm watching the comments. And here's what's great. We don't have to, in the US, look too far. Just look at the state of Washington. I was in Seattle yesterday. They started doing this last year.
They're
the
there.
has already made the change. You can't, like, it was literally, I was talking to Lennox Scott, who you know, and he said, basically the MLS rules just said, hey, you have 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks, you can't write a contract without a buyer brokerage agreement. So for about 2 weeks, everybody went like this, and then they went, oh, okay.
Hey, and then everybody got on board. Listen, this is for this group, and I know your group, Tom. For this group, you need to look at this opportunistically. If you master this, and some of you are already great at it, keep being great. But mastering this now puts you in an area where you're going to make a lot more money. You're going to be the professional in your markets. If you're running a team, if you're running a brokerage, you're going to be able to recruit people and say, look, we're professionals here. We work like CPAs and attorneys. We get agreements signed up front. We're really good at selling our value proposition. People understand all the things we do for them. And there's some great tools coming to market to help you track your time and do things like that. The last piece I'll leave the group with, which will reinforce some of Christy's presentation, is if you want to know what your time is worth, if you want to know what your time in real estate is worth, the way to do it, there's a simple calculation to give, because people go, I don't know. And this for me is like, if you need to get amped up about getting this done and selling your clients, go take your income from last year, right? Or the last 2 years, the last 3 years, pick a period of time, right? And then take your full-time working hours, which is about 2,000 hours people work in a year. Some of you work 2,400 hours. Tom, you work like 3,000 hours. I work like 3,000 hours. But take your working hours, right? Slice off half of those for business development. Most of you spend half your time in business development. So take 1,000 hours. If it's a 2,000 working hours in a year, take 1,000 hours. Take what your actual take home, divide it by 1,000. That's your hourly rate. That's what your time is worth. And then go see, well, how many deals did I do in those years? And you can get to you're probably spending between 50 and 150 hours per transaction with your clients, and start thinking of yourself in that way. Because if you think of yourself, you go, wow, I'm a $300 an hour person. I'm a $350 an hour person. Now imagine yourself as a well-compensated attorney, accountant, engineer. You're meeting with a client for the first time, and you're at 300, 400. Some people on this call are $700 or $800 people an hour, $800 an hour people, right? You would never start working with a client without something written up front, without an understanding of the value of your time. So take that exercise, take what Christy gave you, and take this motivation and go back and let's take the market. Let's be the professionals, everybody here. I know you're professionals, and this is just owning it, claiming it, and doing it. That's all it is.
I love it, man. What a perfect way to finish, Jack. Thank you so much. And by the way, everybody, so I'm a little sick today. Jack was going to drive up from Austin. We were going to do a podcast. We're going to do it next week. So we're going to go deep on this because somebody was like, leave Jack on for another hour. Right? But we've already gone way
I've got
over
a lot more. I've got a lot more content you guys. I've got a lot more content for you guys next week. So we'll dig in.
Yeah.
We'll dig in. We got more.
Yeah, you'll all see that on my podcast. And so, Jack, thank you so much, man. I really, really appreciate you always. And if you're a broker owner out there and you're like, we're confused, we don't know what to do, you need to reach out to T360 today. Go to their website, book a consultation. Like, they are the go-to source for all of this stuff and so much more. Hey, I want to get better technology. I want to train my agents better, all this stuff. So, Jack, kudos to you guys. Thank you so much. You guys are a blessing to the industry. All right. So I'm going to wrap it up with you guys, and I'm going to remind you of a couple of things. Thank you, Jack, as we end. I want to go back to, again, the converging forces of what's happening. We know we're in an election cycle. We know the rates are going to drop. We know there's massive buyer demand. And we also know whoever lists the most houses puts themselves, you, in the best possible position to win. That's why I spent so much time in the beginning front loading you with Jimmy and with Jason to make sure that you're in the best possible position. I also want to remind you, no more than 3 goals. This is a year of simplification. We got to keep things very simple in 2024. So what's your volume close goal for the first quarter? How many marketing activities or marketing results do you want to produce in the first quarter? And then how many listing appointments will you go on in the first quarter? I want to see that up and visual inside of your office. Lastly, Hector, put up that little banner thing at the bottom. If you're not one of my clients today, and I have so many of my clients out there, God bless you guys. I love you all. A bunch of you all see you in Orlando coming up at our Orlando Elite Retreat. This is your last shot. If you want to say, hey, I want to coach like Christy, or hey, I really need a marketing coach, or you know what, just make me a bananas offer. If you call my office today and you at least say, okay, let's book an appointment, then at least you're in the queue for my bananas offer, which my office is open here in Dallas for another 2 hours. And in Orange County, it is open for a couple more hours. So I'm going to encourage you to call my office. And in the meantime, I hope I get to see you. I'm going to do about, 40, 50 events around the country. Jason was just in Orlando. I was just in Santa Clara, California. I'm going to be in Houston. I'm going to be in Dallas. We are going to be everywhere this year. People like Coach Christy, Jeff Mays, Emily Kettenberg, Emily Terrell, so many of our besties. So make sure you're racing over to tomferry.com to find out when we're going to be in your area. And if we're even close to you, I'm definitely coming to Boston. You know it. And I will see you also in Orlando. I am going to be in New Jersey, I think in Hoboken. So you'll have to make the trip over the tunnel, just like my son who lives off Allen and Houston, or Allen and Houston. We will be in South Florida. I'm not sure if we're going to be in Ohio. I did see Nashville. We'll definitely be there. Lots in SoCal, lots in Denver, all kinds of places coming up. I don't know if I'm going to be in Raleigh. No, we are going to be in Raleigh, and we are going to be in St. Louis, and I was just in Northern California. All right, so everybody's saying, please come here. I want to go to South Africa. I want to come to South Africa. Montana, no, but I will be in Jackson Hole. All right, so I got to bounce. Make sure you call my office, right? Give yourself the gift of guidance and accountability and structure. Let's get more stuff done. So call my office. Thank you guys for being a part of this. God bless you. 2024 is going to be absolutely bananas because you are going to go out there and do the work. I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Take care. And hey, let's go. That's bananas. All right. I'll see you guys soon. Take care.